Welcome to the Your Music Industry Podcast.
The podcast that gives you a direct route into the music industry's greatest minds. Your Music Industry is proudly brought to you by the Liverpool Audio Network with your host, Daniel Fisher-Jones.
Welcome to episode number 7 of Your Music Industry. Today's episode is not only an extremely insightful one, but also a special one for me personally. Years ago when I first got into making music, which was around the time of the EDM main room sound, other than my family and friends close to me, the first person to give me the time of day within the industry was today's guest. Now, it's a pleasure to call Paul a friend, and on so many fronts, someone who I look up to. But before we get into introducing Paul and this episode's sponsor, I'd like to highlight a very special opportunity for everyone listening. The Liverpool Audio Network story started almost 1 year ago, and as part of our anniversary, we're offering you a chance to be part of the story. For our first anniversary, Independent Venue Week, and being led by a mission to develop Liverpool's electronic music scene, we bring to you the inaugural Link, the Electronic Sound Summit, an annual conference dedicated to connecting the Northwest music scene and creating a positive space for music producers and music industry professionals to learn, develop, and connect. So far, the lineup includes the likes of music production heavyweights Melody and Futurebound to industry and business leaders from the likes of Kev McManus, Peter Guy, and Anna Russell. If you'd like to join a whole movement of making Liverpool the #1 destination for electronic music in the UK, search Liverpool Audio in your preferred social media and secure your place at Link, the Electronic Sound Summit. Tickets are from £15. I look forward to seeing you there. So before I introduce our first guest of the show, I want to say an absolutely huge thank you to this episode's sponsor. By supporting this podcast, they're supporting your growth as an artist and as an individual. As a creative artist in the world of sound, you need the best tools for the job. Some of those tools will include the likes of VST synths and sound files, aka samples. Splice is the subscription platform for exactly that. With a vast array of over 1 million samples, they cater to every genre and creative spark. Each sample is thoroughly tagged, enabling you to smoothly explore their whole library. Having tags such as the key of the sample, you have the power to explore an array of samples that harmonically resonate with your track. With the filtered search in seconds, you can be finding inspiration and sample files that not only harmonically fit with your track, but are also of extreme high quality. Splice Sounds comes in the form of a monthly subscription, which, for only $7.99 a month, gives you access to this whole sound library. And on top of that, Splice have kindly offered every single listener of this podcast 1 free month. Use the code LiverpoolAudio to obtain your free month, or head over to splice.com/Liverpool-audio. So, today's guest. To say he's experienced a whole range of roles within the industry is a pretty big understatement. From being a qualified sound therapist to co-founding Chapter 24 Records to an absolutely insane quantity of musical output, including credits with the likes of Sasha on his Late Night Tales record, to composing for film with recent work with Jeff Rona on his Generation Iron 2 soundtrack. Today's guest is Make Your Transition founder, Liverpool's own Paul Nolan. Welcome to the Your Music Industry podcast, Paul. Thanks for coming down, and I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you very much for having me. This will be, I'm sure, a very interesting period of time where we have one of our conversations that are always so enlightening, shall we say?
Yeah, let's say. So first I'd like to start with Sasha, then maybe talk about kind of your philosophy on how personal development sits in with artist development, and also what's the future for Paul Nolan. So, Sasha, the Late Night Tales records, how did that come into fruition?
The first question everybody wants to know. So, I've known Sasha for a long time, because despite how I look, I'm actually a lot older than I seem. So, I've been in this industry now for probably about 20 years as a clubber, and then moving behind the scenes. First proper job in the industry was working for Cream. And one of my oldest friends, and if you know anything about me, you'll know one of my oldest friends in the industry is Lee Burridge. And I met Lee when I was 19. So again, like a near 20-year friendship that we've had. So I got to meet Sasha very sort of early on in that friendship due to the fact that Lee was doing his thing with Sasha at that point. It was called Tyrant. So it was him, Craig Richards and Sasha. They were the original three. Later on, Sasha kind of made an exit from that. And Lee and Craig carried on with the Tyrant brand. But hanging around with Lee meant I got to meet a lot of very serious artists and became friends with all of them because they were all friends with Lee. People like Sander Kleinenberg, for example. He became a very big friend at the time. Craig, obviously, Craig Richards. And then Sasha. And knew each other in passing. Wasn't like a great friendship. And then we crossed paths in 2011 properly. We did some mentoring work together for a project known as Burn Studios, which is now known as Burn Residency, which is connected to the IMS conference in Ibiza. So I curated the educational part of the first year of Burn Studios, as it were. And Sasha did a remix competition, and the winners of that remix competition were all flown out to Ibiza. And we did like a week's worth, kind of like a boot camp type thing. And then there was a winner announced and everything else. And that's when that was the first time we'd ever really spoke about music properly. And we did a couple of masterclasses together, and, we got on pretty well and stuff like that. And we just continued to be in touch, and I'd see him at gigs and stuff. And the thing that people kind of forget is, like, these artists are the human beings. And one of my slightly vulgar yet famous or favourite terms about people in the music industry when people get a bit starstruck, I always like to remind people, like, we all shit out the same hole, And I just treated Sasha the way I treat everybody else, the way I treat you, the way I treat a guy on the street. Okay, he's done amazing things in the industry, but he's a human being at the end of the day. And the thing is, like, I've always approached artists and I've approached like the people who I've admired just from a human perspective. That's the way I am. I'm a working class shithead from like North Liverpool. You just crack on at the end of the day. And for a number of years after we did the Burn thing, I kept in touch with Sasha and never really spoke to him about music or anything like that. It was more when I saw him at a gig, it was more like, we'd get together and we'd like, talk about fantasy football and, because we're both big Liverpool supporters and, how the Reds were doing and who should we buy and who's shit and who should we sell and that kind of thing. And then food and everything else bar music. Because as you can imagine, when an artist like him is in that environment, they're getting harangued by people, which, don't get me wrong, is a nice thing, but, it's tiring after a while. So it's, I've always tried to be the person who you could go and have a real conversation to, and just have a bit of authenticity as well as like the excitement of the music, and obviously I'm there to see him play as well. So 2015, I put the feelers out to potentially move to Los Angeles, and I'd saved up a load of money and decided to put a line in the sand and say, right, I'm going in September of 2015. I had no idea what I was going to do. Like, literally, it was like, right, I'm going to book a flight and see what happens. And then in the August, I literally had a flight booked and that was it. I didn't have an apartment, didn't have any idea about what I was going to do, where I was going to be. I just knew I was going to Los Angeles and I'd kind of sort it out after I got there. And then randomly one day, Sasha called me and he'd been for dinner with Steve Parry. And Steve mentioned that I was moving to LA. And just through a weird synchronicity, turned out Sasha was going to spend the winter in LA. So Sasha phoned me up and he said, do you want to come for a coffee? And he was in Liverpool because he always goes to the first Liverpool home game of the season if he can. So we go for a coffee together, and just out of the blue, he said, you're moving to LA? He said, yeah. He goes, well, do you want to do the album with me? Because I'm going to get a studio space in LA and I'm going to need someone I can trust, and I've known you for a long time and I know you're good. Everyone who I've spoken to, sort of espouses like how good you are in the studio and everything else, and I obviously know that from prior experience. So do you fancy it? I mean, obviously, like, you know, and it bit his arm off, you know what I mean? And it took his hand off. So in one very interesting Friday afternoon, I went from having just a flight. In 6 hours, I went from just a flight to flight, studio project, moving into a studio, and got an apartment in Venice Beach, which happened to be literally 5 minutes walk away from where Sasha was moving to, like on the same road pretty much, which was just bonkers. So it shows you that, you know, when something's right, it just all falls into place effortlessly. So that's how it started, really. And then, as I say, the end of September, moved over there, and then we got cracking, and we spent a good 6 months together in the studio, 3 of which we were doing the album. And yeah, we worked on a load of other things as well, but it was a hell of a time.
Have you got any ideas what you think you might have done if that didn't come into fruition?
I haven't even thought about it.
No.
I haven't even thought about it. I mean, my original plan was to just go and do what I've always done, but for a longer term period, because I'd been chopping and changing between England and LA quite a bit. I was building a network up there, because I don't just work in dance music, I do have occasional forays into the film industry as well. So I've done short movies, I've done sound design, Foley, dubbing, mixing, you name it. I've done everything. I was head of a sound department in 2014 on a feature film for location sound. So I've always had this passion for film as well. So my plan was to just expand my network and just be there for the longer term, and see what opportunities kind of came up. And then, I know, obviously a huge possibility, a huge opportunity came out almost immediately. And then that plugged me into a much deeper crew, a much deeper level of the industry. Where we did the album is one of the most iconic recording studios in LA, if not the world. It's called The Village in West LA. So it's technically Santa Monica, but it's more like West LA. And that was where the Smashing Pumpkins did Melancholy and The Infinite Sadness. And you walk in, and it tells you something that when you walk through the door, like when Sasha's a bit starstruck, then that's when you know you're in an interesting place, you know, after everything he's done. And you walk in the door and there's just nothing but history that smacks you in the face. You know, just to give you, you know, a few names of who's recorded there. Dr. Dre did The Chronic there. Snoop Dogg did Doggy Style there. Chili Peppers did Californication.
Oh wow, that's a big one.
And one of the studios directly underneath ours was actually custom built for Fleetwood Mac when they did Tusk.
Wow.
Yeah, the Tusk album was recorded almost in its entirety there. So there's all, you know, the gold records, stuff like that, you know. Just, again, they've got rooms for film scores, so they've had, you know, Hunger Games string sessions done there. And just in my time there, the people who I met were just like sort of mind-boggling. You know, you'd walk in one morning and it's like, you know, Iggy Pop's in the kitchen offering to make you coffee, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, you walk to the car park and it's like you'd always have to have a little bit of a sneaky look at, you know, who the car parking spaces were reserved for, because you get an idea about who's coming in today. And you'd regularly see, like, you know, reserved for Lady Gaga and reserved for Snoop Dogg and Busta Rhymes and stuff like that. And just really strange things happening, like St. Vincent knocking on my door one Sunday asking for Japanese restaurant recommendations because I lived around the corner from the studio, and just bizarre things like, you know, Mike D from the Beastie Boys just randomly walking into the studio and asking for directions. And, you know,
didn't someone ask you to turn it down at one point?
Yeah, we got a noise complaint off Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac, which I wear as a badge of honour to this day. So that was brilliant. That was like almost like an announcement of like, okay, yeah, we up in the big leagues now, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, we had to actually disconnect the subs after that. So we had to work mostly just on the near field monitors, because we were using a room that is traditionally, it belonged to, or it still belongs to, Harry Gregson Williams, the English film composer who was one of the first guys off the Hans Zimmer production line. And he's done movies. Most recently, he'd be most well known for The Martian.
Oh yeah.
Alien Covenant, but he's also done loads of mad things. Like he's done Shrek, he's done Team America, he's done Enemy of the State. He's also a bit of a history maker in that he was the first composer to write a fully orchestral dedicated score for a video game. He did Metal Gear Solid 2. So, you know, even being in that room, and, you know, we had to go around to Harry's a couple of times, and it was just, very surreal, very sort of surreal situation, really, across the board, but phenomenal. And you couldn't help but be really, really inspired in that environment. You know, once you got over the initial sort of like, wow, of the whole thing, you know.
So on the Late Night Tales record, what was actually your role? Was it sound design, or was it a bit of everything?
It's a bit of everything. I mean, me credit is for additional production and programming. So I built the studio, because what we had to do was rewire Harry's setup, because it was a 5.1 rig with a Pro Tools icon, and we were just basically using the desk as like a really big amp for Ableton, and that was about it. A big monitor controller, basically. So we put an Apogee ensemble in there, Thunderbolt 2, and we ran off the iMac, the Mac Pro that was running in the studio. It was a trash can Mac Pro, which was brilliant actually for what we did the album on. And I basically wired the whole thing up so the whole thing ran in sync, because there was a lot of hardware involved, especially on the modular side of things. You know, we built this really intricate modular rig in order to get some of the iconic sounds on the album. And then from there, it was a case of, you know, supporting Sasha through going through his ideas and going through his inspirations, and also adding my own take on things as and when required. So it's kind of not clear cut, my role on that album, really, because there's just a whole lot of everything. And it's really funny because I can listen back to that album now and I can still hear sounds, and I can still take myself back to the exact session and the exact moment when those sounds were actually made. And it's like I can remember how those sounds were made. But again, like, there's probably half the sounds on the album that I've had a role in, and I can't even remember how they were done. People ask me, like, how did you make that sound in, like, Line Pulse? And I'm like, I've got a fucking clue. Because it was a moment in time, especially with a lot of hardware stuff. Again, you may notice on a modular rig, on a Euro rack, there's no presets. Like, there's no saving presets. Like, exactly. So, you know, it's a moment in time. So you end up having to have everything recording straight, like all the way through, like in big long takes, so you can capture everything, and then things get cut up, things get changed, things get, you know, transposed up and down an octave, and, you know, smashed to shit. So they end up being completely unrecognizable anyway. So yeah, it was a really fascinating process, and it's something that I learned so much from, because obviously it wasn't just me and Sasha in the studio. We had you know, Dave Gardner, Dennis White in London, Barry Jameson in New York. So it was this kind of really interesting collaborative project where there was at least two people working on something on that album at any point in time, considering there's between all of us there was like an 8 to 9 hour time difference. So while some people were sleeping, other people were working on the tracks. So it became this interesting kind of global project, which we just did the whole thing via Dropbox, and we used Trello for project management. And the hilarious thing about it is we did that album, and the first time all of us were in the same room together was after the first night of live shows at the Barbican. Like a year after. So it was crazy to think that an album of that stature was done while none of us were ever in the same room together at the same time.
I know there's a good like about video that's sticking on the webpage in the show notes, and you're in it yourself, are you?
I'm not in it. I'm mentioned.
You mentioned.
I'm mentioned. Yeah. And that's one of the things Sasha's always been amazing about, really, is he's always been incredibly open about the fact that he collaborates. You know, obviously one of the big taboo topics in the dance music industry is ghostwriting, and how you should all go to hell if you ghostwrite, which is ironic because I see it from the other side. I see it from the film music side of things, where even very well-known electronic artists have to ghostwrite in order to prove themselves, in order to build a career in the film industry. That's sort of like the accepted, received wisdom of like, well, that's how you do it. You know, you develop your skills that way, and then once you're ready, you then move on and you start taking your own projects on. So it's funny because there's two very conflicting points of view there, but I've always loved Sasha's perspective on it, where there's interviews with him with way more hair than he's got now. Back in the 90s, like, you know, when he's like a hair down to his shoulders, and he was talking about like how he just wanted to like put a band together. And that was a really interesting thing, because that's basically what he's still doing now. Whether it's me, Dave and Dennis and Barry, like it was on Scene Delete, or for the live shows, it's like, you know, you swap me for like, say, Charlie May, because, you know, Charlie's obviously got a huge history with Sasha through the likes of Expander and the Involver albums and, you know, all of his iconic records. Or, you know, he's working with different people like he's done across the board. There is that collaborative element, and to be so open about it, and for him to give so much public recognition to me on a personal level was absolutely huge. It really was. It really took my career to another level.
Something I always find interesting within kind of this collaboration thing is how actually the business side of things work with collaborating with an artist such as Sasha. Are you paid just for your work, or do you get royalties? Do you get songwriting royalties? How does it?
It can be both. It can be both, and I'll be honest with you, the way that it needs to work is that for that kind of role, I think it does need to be both. I think there needs to be a recognition of the work you're doing on the day, but also as well a recognition of the ongoing value of that work into the future. So it's important to have your wits about you where that's concerned, and actually not be afraid to have potentially not uncomfortable conversations, but you have to know your worth in that situation, and you have to be covered, which is why I'm a big proponent of, if you're going into such situations, or if you're entering into the industry in a serious way, I can tell you from personal experience, you need to have your publishing sorted like from the beginning. You need to have, maybe not management, but you need to have your sounding boards and people who you can trust, who can advise you, sorted from minute one. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a negotiation, but when you've got someone like Sasha who's just so relaxed and so authentic and real, because what's great about him is that it hasn't changed him one bit. You know, I mean, I've got to a point in my friendship with him, which, you know, I ended up like going to the Champions League final at Anfield in May to watch it on the big screen with his dad. You know, and Steve is a bit of a clubland legend in himself, but that you could probably fill a whole other podcast with stories from him. He's so, you know, down to earth, and he's so unaffected by the career that he's had and the massive changes that it's brought to his life, that those discussions were always so easy. It was more along the lines of, well, what do you want, rather than this is what I think you're entitled to and let's negotiate. It was more like, well, what do you want? You can have whatever you want, it's fine. You know, so it made the whole process very, very simple.
Have you got a favourite production out of the Scene Delete album?
Yeah, it's probably one of the obvious ones, but Rooms.
Rooms?
Yeah. I love both the vocal tracks, to be honest. I love Bring on the Night Time as well. But Rooms holds a very special place for me, because it was like two of my early heroes sat either side of me in a studio in LA, and it was very much a pinch myself moment, you know. At the beginning of the whole project, I did have this kind of very interesting inner child moment where, like, 17-year-old me, who was first getting into clubbing, was doing backflips inside me, and 35-year-old me was trying to be all cool and serious and like, yeah, you know, that kind of thing. And in my head, I'm going, I'm in the fucking studio with Sasha, what the fuck is going on? But then on top of that, just to have like John there, John Graham, who was living in LA at the time, he's moved back to the UK as well now. He was and you know, he was a massive early influence on me with his work with Tilt and a lot of other names like, you know, Stoneproof and stuff like that as well. Obviously he sung the vocal on Rooms, and I did a lot of work on, I tracked the second verse of those vocals and did a lot of the sound design on that as well. So to play such a, you know, an integral part in one of the main tracks on the album was was amazing. It really was. It was one of those things where you take a step back and you kind of appreciate how far you've come and how mad the journey's been. You know.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting is Nora, the new headphones that are out. The demo track that is played through the app after it's done the hearing test is line 2. Is it?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
View 2.
View 2, yeah.
View 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love that track. And Werewolf as well.
Yeah.
They're my 2
Oh my God, yeah, Werewolf. We had such a good time doing that. There was a few moments when we did that. When we cracked the sound of Werewolf, we there was moments when like me and Sasha were like jumping up and down on the sofa in the studio going, listen to that, that's amazing. You know. Yeah, so yeah, great moments really through the production of that record.
So recently at BBC Introducing, during, I believe it was the AFM panel about mental health, you mentioned during that time you experienced a bit of a burnout. I'll also add the video of that in the podcast kind of notes. Would you like to mention
Yeah,
that?
sure. I mean, it was an interesting time because it shows you, like, I think people get this kind of perception of life being this kind of linear thing and it being, you know, you're either up or you're down. And one of the things that I really experienced at that time was that you can be simultaneously high as a fucking kite and lower than low at the same time.
Yeah.
It was so weird because, you know, I'd spent a lot of time and a lot of years like pushing for opportunities like that, even though the irony of that situation is it kind of just fell on my lap. You know, you're pushing really hard for what you want and then the thing you want falls on your lap with no effort at all. That proves to you in totality that there's actually, it's a bit of a controversial opinion, but there's absolutely no correlation between success and hard work. Like, that's just complete bullshit. I mean, obviously working hard can help, but it's nowhere near as important as people think it is. But with my sort of personal situation, I was, as I say, it was very heady. It was, you know, in LA, and after the album happened, I mean, the burnout really happened after the album.
Oh, was it?
And after it came out, because once it became apparent, because like, we kept it really, really quiet for a while, and like Sasha was doing hilarious things on social media about like taking photographs of the back of my head in the studio, and like, you know, people trying to guess who it was, you know. It's really funny. But with what happened afterwards was, yeah, it was a challenge because after Scene Delete, there was a lack of work for me in LA, and LA can be a very challenging place to live. I mean, everybody gets the impression of like, oh my God, LA, and they even go there on like a holiday or they stay there for the week and it's like, wow, this place is amazing. And you don't realise that, you know, there's like 30 million people that live in that city, like more than half the population of England live in one place that by the laws of nature shouldn't exist because it's been built on top of a desert and they import all of their water. You know, it's a crazy, crazy place, and everyone's there to work an angle and everyone's there to work. But it leads to a lack of authenticity, unfortunately. And I definitely suffered with that, more being a lack of connection. Also, as well, it was very busy for me because my touring and DJing went through the roof off the back of that album. And, you know, obviously the what's the word I'm looking for? The recognition and the exposure that it gave me. So I was doing like insane things, like, you know, flying back from LA to Ireland to go and open for Max Cooper, and then flying straight back to LA like the following Monday via London, and then having to do things like, you know, go all the way to Bali to play a gig to go all the way back. So like, it wasn't well managed, and all the while I wasn't really living in line with my values. But I was going through a bit of a stage of not really knowing who the fuck I was, really, to be honest. So obviously, as things got higher and higher, in a weird way, things got more and more pressurised. And it's an interesting one because, as I said on the FM panel, more and more of the things that you've been working so hard to happen come in. But because of the way that you are and the fact that you're not living in line with your truth, you give less and less of a shit. So one gig I played for an old mate of mine, Dave Ralph, who works for Insomniac, who runs Electric Daisy Carnival in America, and the huge company in dance music now. Played for them at their club called Exchange, which is the old stock exchange in downtown LA. Opened for an EDM artist called Audien, not to be confused with Audion, which is hilarious because the month later I basically played with Audion. So it was like, okay, right, someone's having a laugh with the bookings here. You know, there was only an E and an O's worth of difference, but there was a world of difference in the sets. But I played in front of probably 2,000 people that Friday night, opening. Name up in like massive video screens, you know, my name's being projected across the ceiling, and it's just like, you know, nobody's leaving, and I've just played like a 3-hour warm-up for this guy. And that was amazing. Like the actual like physical experience of playing was wicked to that kind of crowd, and the sound system there is on point. You know, like everything Insomniac do, they're fantastic. And I just remember walking off the decks thinking, I do not give a flying fuck. Like, get me out of here. And I literally took my USB out of the decks, put my headphones in my backpack, didn't even say goodbye to anyone, walked up the club, met my friend Dustin, went for a glass of wine next door, went home, went to bed. Felt like shit. Really just very, very strangely disconnected to the whole thing, when really you'd think I'd be absolutely like flying, you know. Yeah, oh my God, yeah, absolutely. And just felt completely disconnected from it. And that was really that situation, and a few other things. Like I had a relationship go bad as well, which, you know, is a whole other matter, but the whole thing resulted in a complete burnout. And it was a real lesson to me that, you know, you can actually get the things you want in life, and if you're not right within yourself, and if you've not, you know, done the work to find out who you are really in truth, you know, you can actually sabotage yourself to the point where you can actually deny yourself of everything you've ever wanted because you've convinced yourself that it's like shit. You know, it's a very, very interesting situation, and I see it all the time, and I hear it all the time with artists and musicians, because they put themselves under that much pressure that the thing that they strive for becomes actually the thing that they almost need to avoid the most. Because it's almost like pick your poison in a way. And it's a very challenging process, but grateful that I've come through it, because, you know, it allowed me to make huge changes in my life. And anyone who knows me well knows, like, the last couple of years has been a fucking ride, to the point where I'm probably going to write a book about it at some point. But yeah, and it's still happening. It's still happening even now. It's still happening this week. But yeah, interesting times in life, and wouldn't change any of it, to be honest.
I know Aubrey Marcus has got the concept of being like fit for service, and power comes pressure, and pressure comes power. And how, if you don't know yourself, you don't know yourself, don't know your strengths, don't know your weaknesses, then that pressure will get rid of that power, and you lose where you think and where you want to go as well. So. Well,
exactly. I mean, as he said, or the old saying is, you know, pressure creates the diamond, and you find out who you really are in those situations. That's the irony of it. By losing yourself, you actually get an opportunity to find yourself in truth. So it's an incredibly important thing, and these are initiations that we all have to go through. Not saying that musicians need to go through mental health problems in order to find that, and obviously we'd like to avoid it, but in a weird way I wouldn't want to completely avoid it, because I do subscribe to the point of view that if we all had very cushy upbringings and it was all very comfortable and not challenging, we would actually be denied the opportunity to find out who we really are. And that's why I think people go in for all sorts of like physical challenges, whether it's like, you know, running marathons or climbing mountains, for example. You know, we do these things in order to try and not just achieve the physical feat, but also to try and figure out who we are really when we're under that kind of duress and under that kind of pressure. So there is a degree of actually those challenges are something that we all need to go through. What I'm very keen to do is obviously share my own story, but also be able to help people have like a set of tools where they can navigate. Because the tool set that I've developed over the last couple of years, particularly since I've gone through that, is absolutely remarkable and is something that people can develop. It's not something that you're given. You know, it's not something you're born with. You know, I don't subscribe to, you know, nature versus nurture. Yeah, people are born with like a certain aptitude for certain things, but you can create that within yourself as well. And you have to be willing to really, really go there and really take a deep and very long and very honest and possibly quite painful look at yourself in order to figure out where you are off alignment and what parts of you need healing and what parts of you need looking at and what parts of you that you have that are actually in line that are going to help you to overcome that.
Before we carry on with this enlightening and insightful conversation with Paul Nolan, as a thanks to you for being so engaged with the episode, I've got a secret to tell you. You're hearing this first on the podcast. On Saturday's 2nd at Link, the Electronic Sound Summit, this episode's guest, Mr. Paul Nolan, is going to be running some sessions at the summit. If you can guess what the session topic might be, I'll give the winner 2 free tickets to the summit worth a magnificent £50. If you share this episode on your social media with your guesses on the session topic, we'll announce the winner in the coming week. Don't forget to tag us though, otherwise we won't know. Use #YourMusicIndustry or @LiverpoolAudio. Once again, I'd like to say a huge thanks to Splice for sponsoring this episode. Their support has been unreal. Don't forget to use the code LiverpoolAudio for your free month and to gain access to the Splice sample platform.
So make your transition. Is that the result of that experience and wanting to give people the tools to develop themselves and to also move forward with, example, to finish more music? You took more of kind of a habitual approach and kind of psychological as well, didn't you? Is that kind of what the result of that process was?
Yeah, very much so. I think it was an understanding of how I could elevate what I was already doing on a one-to-one level. People who aren't familiar with my background is I've taught music production, audio engineering for the best part of 10 years in class situations for a lot of institutions. And in 2011, I decided to go freelance and go into a one-to-one situation because I found the group dynamic, and especially the group dynamic around the way that the private sector within the dance music industry operates. I find it quite frustrating to this day. I can do a lot more work in a lot shorter time with an individual in a one-to-one situation. And don't get me wrong, I can have a profound effect on people in a group dynamic, but the one-to-one is much more rewarding, and you can really get in there and really get specific and really tailor what you're offering to people in a way that will work specifically for them. So the move from what my previous company was called, Paul Nolan Sound, into Make Your Transition, it was all about just channeling that spirit of what I was doing in my own life at that time, which was I was making a lot of transitions in my life. I'm continuing to make those right now, not gender, just to get clear that rumor up. Yeah, but in terms of actually understanding what it is that we're doing on a deeper level, where, don't get me wrong, that started off with, you know, if you push this button in Logic, it'll do this, and if you turn that knob, that filter will work, and, you know, this is an ADSR envelope and everything else. You know, anyone can learn that. Let's be honest, anyone can learn that after a few minutes of reading the manual or, you know, sitting in front of the computer for long enough and just having a play, right? You know, that's what you would call application-based learning, which is like tab A, slot B, C happens, right? Me, I've always been interested in the more implication-based approach of, well, why? Why would we do this? Why would we do this in a particular context? Why would we cross-reference and combine two of those application-based techniques in order to get us somewhere more interesting, but on a deeper level? Like, what are we trying to say?
Yeah.
What are we trying to say musically? So the application leads to the implication eventually if you stick around long enough and ask the right questions. So for me, I'm reflecting my own journey as an artist, my own journey as a sound designer and a creative, and as a human being and as a soul as well, into what I now offer. So the answer to the question is personal development and artist development, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
You can't, I mean, I'm a firm believer in you can't be the best artist you can be without becoming the best version of yourself that you can be as a human being. One thing I did say at the AFEM panel at BBC Introducing, I kind of glazed across it, but it's an important point. This whole perception of the flawed genius, the artist who must need to have this, you know, mental health problem in order to do his best work, I think is absolute fucking bullshit. Because I can tell you, when I'm on my arse, depressed, tunes ain't getting written. Sessions aren't happening. I'm not helping people. I'm at my best when I'm at my best. And when I'm in alignment, I've had enough rest, I've had enough sleep, I've hydrated, you know, I've done enough handstands at yoga, you know, that type of thing. And it's a very, very important point, and we need to move on from this perception of, like, you know, this wounded artist that, you know, that is apparently how you get there. I mean, I could reel off hundreds of artists who have had that perception, but I could reel off just as many artists who aren't like that at all, who haven't had those types of problems, who are incredibly creative people. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of inspiration to take from such experiences, and that's why I think we look at it as a well of inspiration. But again, the whole reality of, you know, you need to be basically like slightly bonkers in order to do this, I think is completely wrong. So in terms of what I try and do, I love actually something Patrice Baumel said to me recently. He said, the most powerful plugin you own is you.
Wow, that's good.
And it was a really nice way of like saying what I would say, which is an equivalent of, I've always said, the biggest differentiator between you succeeding and failing as an artist is the person sat in the chair. And it's not about the knobs you turn on the plugin, it's about the levers you pull inside your own mind. So what I do as an approach to personal development and artist development is I look for the biggest levers that I can grab and pull in people to give the biggest amount of shift and the biggest amount of change for the least amount of effort, essentially. So if it's making them more aware of themselves, if it's, you know, asking them what their intentions are, and getting them to really tune in very deeply as to, like, you know, what are you and who are you as an artist, and using that as a grounding for everything else that you do. And the amount of artists who have benefited from that have been huge, and the track record of NYT at the moment is very much speaking for itself.
And especially locally with Cusp as well.
Cusp are smashing it.
Yeah.
They really are. They're doing very, very well. And it's great because it's such a lovely story of seeing how quickly they've developed. And they're a lovely example of when I work with people, like they didn't just take the ball and run with it. They turned the ball into a different shape and made a completely new game out of it. You know, they really, really took it and made it their own. And there's a few other artists, not just on the local level, but like nationally and internationally, who've done that as well, which is fantastic. And it's such a privilege to be able to, you know, as Aubrey Marcus says, like, be fit for service and be able to help people in that way and be able to help them shift their lives more towards where they want to be, and be able to give them that insight and guidance and to help them understand that it's possible. You know, the thing I always say to people in sessions is, like, there's no difference between me and you. Like, absurd things get said about me, like I'm a freak of nature, or I'm some sort of genius or some sort of guru, and it's like, no, I've just got more miles on the clock than you. I've just got more studio hours booked, you know, and it's just about asking the right questions. All right, I might have some degree of like natural aptitude for it, but you didn't hear the tunes I was making 15 years ago when I was fucking trying. Trust me, mate. Trust me. You wouldn't play it in an elevator, you know what I mean? Never mind on a dance floor.
So in terms of lifestyles, you've got an interesting one with the yoga, with a lot of interesting things. So how, to everyone listening, what is your yogic practice? And also, how has that helped you develop with, not physically, but mentally as well?
I mean, I do it for those reasons. I'd do it for the mental and the spiritual and the emotional reasons. Because really there is wisdom in the body. And one thing that I've come to realise, at least in the last couple of years, is that there's absolutely no separation between the mind and body. That's one of the biggest crimes against humanity in the last few hundred years, that where, you know, medical science actually made a separation between the soul or the mind and the physical body. So what yoga's allowed me to do is really connect in with that. And it's helped me process a lot. It's helped me process a lot of grief. It's helped me process a lot of trauma in my life. It's allowed me to really find a grounding. And also as well, you know, there is obviously the exercise element to it as well. I mean, I almost exclusively do yoga. I very, very rarely, if ever, lift weights. So I do hot yoga, mostly Bikram or vinyasa flows, occasional yin practices. I'll do that anything up to 6 times a week. And then I'll go for a nice big long run once a week, anything up to about 7 miles. And that is, it's moving meditation at the end of the day. Yeah. It really, really is. So it just allows you to really, you know, focus your intention and move with intention and with awareness and in full consciousness. Because trust me, when it's like 60% humidity and 35 degrees centigrade in there, you are conscious of every move you make, and any unnecessary movements are just going to help you get on the floor like just a pool of sweat and whatever else. So it's completely changed my life. I started practicing hot yoga 5.5 years ago. And right from minute one, it was just like this thing that glued all the different parts of my life together. Because I noticed it was almost as if, like, you know, every time I do a yoga class, somebody puts the pin in me and restores me back to factory settings. You know, it really is. It allows me to let go of a lot of like it's a purge, essentially. It's a physical purge in the sense of like you're sweating. You're effectively doing incredibly hard stretches in a sauna for 90 minutes. So, you know, there's a lot of like medical science that's starting to back up the benefits of it. But, you know, I feel it in the body every single day. And I know now, because if I go more than 4 or 5 days without a hot yoga class, like I turn into a fucking prick. Like I really, really do. I become like just an angry man. I become Michael Douglas and falling down, basically. So yeah, it's been enormously beneficial creatively as well, because by the time I've done like a morning yoga class and I get home and I'm ready to get in the studio, I am just completely clear. A lot of people ask me like, what's on your mind when you're in the studio after a yoga class? I'm like, nothing. I am like a hollow bone. I am like, you know, an empty vessel. So I'm just ready to just allow the creative ideas to flow through me. So it allows me to get into a creative flow state. It's been incredible for my body. I've reversed early signs of sciatica. It helps me manage carpal tunnel syndrome in my right hand due to excessive mouse use. And yeah, a lot of other ailments that were starting to kind of like come into my body at the age of, well, I started yoga when I was 33. I'm 38 now, nearly 39. And yeah, it's just been the single best investment I've ever made in my body. And it's great because there's hot yoga studios worldwide as well. So, you know, I was recently on tour in Australia and Bali, and it was just super easy. You just roll into Seminyak or Brisbane or Sydney and go, right, where's the hot yoga studio? Great. And you just roll in, do a class, feel great. So it's like, it's kind of my grounding at the end of the day.
I suppose so. It's really built well into your routine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a central cog of the routine. It really, really is. It's the central place of everything, really. It's interesting, Joe Rogan put an interesting post up because he does a lot of hot yoga as well. Yeah, and he was talking about how it glues together all of his other practices. And that is something that I really agree with him on. It's definitely been my experience that, you know, they always talk about like the 8 limbs of yoga. And the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is actually a really interesting book to read. Just even if you're not into yoga, it's some really interesting wisdom in there. And I've definitely felt that sort of seep into every single area of my life, whether it's I'm in a stressful situation like I was on Monday when somebody committed suicide on a train that I was on, or, you know, threw themselves in front of a train that I was on, just to be able to go back to the breath and be able to sort of center yourself and take a step back, and no matter what emotions or what thoughts are coming up, you can just kind of observe them and let them go. Whether you do that in a movement practice or whether you do that in a real life situation, that's like the gift.
Yeah.
I mean, people think the putting your leg over your head is the yoga, and it's not. It's the breathing. It really is. Like, it allows you to really understand the power of your own breath.
Wow. Yeah. So what was that book?
The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
Yeah, I'll have to put that in the show notes. So I'll have to check it out myself.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. I mean, a lot of it doesn't necessarily connect to the physical practice. The physical practice of yoga was founded so essentially people could sit in meditation for longer to make the body strong in order to help that. Vinyasa flows were invented later on when certain yogis became interested in actually building the body and actually, like, you know, gaining strength. So that's kind of like I suppose you could say that's like almost like my CrossFit. You know, Vinyasa is almost like the CrossFit of yoga, if you will. But in a really interesting way, because it's not, I mean, it's fatiguing, but it's not fatiguing in the same way as, say, like a CrossFit or like a weights thing. And I think we've been sold a lie in movement practices as well about, you know, it should hurt. And I know that through, if you read, I mean, people, Joe Rogan and other people have kind of put me onto, people like Pavel Tsatsouline, Georges St. Pierre, one of the legendary UFC fighters, his coach, Firas Zahabi. He talks about how if somebody he's training is sore the next day, it means they've overtrained. And a lot of people, like, you know, wear that pain as like a badge of honor, essentially. Like, you know, look how hard I've worked. Well, that's great, but now you can't train for a week. So I've kind of evolved my exercise practice to be a daily practice where I'll be honest with you, I've done nearly 3 weeks every single day now. And it's either a run or a home workout or a yoga class or, you know, my latest obsession, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's something every single day. And there's nothing wrong in actually doing just enough in order to, you know, get the wheels turning, so to speak. You know, we don't have to push to failure. Don't have to do that at all. You know, you shouldn't be sore, is the honest answer.
So have you got, with having kind of physical routines, do you have any like morning routines or evening routines or anything? Or?
I'm a bit more flexible, if I'm being honest. I kind of fluidly roll with what my body's telling me at any particular time. Like this morning, like I was going to go to a yoga class at 10. I woke up and I was like, can't be arsed. Do you want to go for a run? Not really. There's a yoga class on at 6. All right, well, I'll go to 6 o'clock. So I'll go tonight when my body feels ready for it. You know, I'm actually not one for really stringent routines, if I'm being honest with you. Even though I do have, like, you know, rituals and I do have practices when I'm in the studio, I like to run my schedule a little more fluidly so I can react to the day. I think a lot of people get to, I mean, it's nice to have a routine. Like I have like a kind of a framework that I work within. But outside of that, it's just nice and fluid. And, you know, I meditate when I feel like I want to meditate. I go for a run when my body says it's time to go for a run. I go to yoga when my body says it's time to go to yoga. So I just, you know, my main routine is to just listen to my body and what it wants. And I've learned to give it what it wants.
That's interesting, a framework versus a routine. I really like that.
Yeah. It's a structured container.
Yeah.
Really, more than anything, where, you know, I think a lot of people get, I mean, I put a post up on Facebook the other week about don't confuse being busy with being successful. And that is one of the biggest lies that we've been sold in society, really. And as I said at the end of that post, you know, don't bluff yourself into thinking that success is having an itinerant life. I remember a friend of mine sent me a post and it was great. I think it was aimed at all these like corporate high flyers in Silicon Valley. And the title of the post was, if you're so successful, why are you still working so fucking hard? And isn't it supposed to be that we work hard now in order to create time and resource so we can, you know, enjoy life?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. You know, I judge my success on how much unconstructed time that I have in order to, you know, bury my head into other things that I'm interested in, like, you know, my more, I mean, I hate the term, the more spiritual practices or other things that I've got going on in my life. You know, don't get me wrong, music is the major passion in my life, but that's not me.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't attach any identity or value I don't. That was one actually going back to what I was saying about my personal journey before. One of the biggest problems that I had back then was that I was deriving my entire sense of self-worth and identity through or from the goals that I had. So therefore, if I didn't achieve a certain goal, I wasn't worth shit. And that is one of the biggest mistakes anyone can ever make. And it's actually a really good practice to sort of let go of control of the outcome and be fine with, you know what, I may never play that gig.
Yeah.
I may never win that award. I may never achieve that. And it's funny because the people who I've heard talk about that universally say the same thing. Once you let go of the fact that, that might never happen, it's amazing how it happens.
It's attachment, isn't it?
It really is. It's pure attachment. And also as well, it's the thing of, I often make the analogy of, we all see these people that, they drop their car keys, and in the gargantuan effort for them to bend down and collect their car keys, they kick them 5 meters further down the road. And it's actually the one of the biggest lessons I've learned this year is actually when you push and when you strive and you manipulate situations in order to try and achieve a preconceived outcome, whether that's with work or a creative project or a relationship or anything else in life, you're actually making it less likely to happen. Whereas if you took a step back and let it all unfold naturally, it won't happen the way you think, but you will always get what you need. And it's amazing that actually what arrives is far greater and far more superior than what your little lizard brain can concoct in its own little imagination, So it's an interesting process of learning.
You mentioned previously about rituals, and before the first LAN event, through your Twitter activity, you discovered James Clear, who's been a real pinnacle in my own awareness and understanding of habits. And I recently seen, it might have been yesterday, you released a post on Make Your Transition about rituals within the studio. What could you talk the listeners through kind of what those are?
Yeah, I mean, it can be anything that gets you into a certain frame of mind. So let's not get it twisted. As I say, I have a framework. Essentially what I've just said is it's kind of code for I'll do whatever they want when the fuck I want.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I don't get myself into it. Right, well, I've got this amount of time. I need to get myself into this mindset to do this task. So when that time comes, I do have these little rituals that I do before I start creating in the studio, particularly. So it comes from a concept that I came across another book that you might want to put in the show notes by a ballet choreographer called Twyla Tharp.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, called The Creative Habit. I read this book a long time ago, about 10 or so years ago. And she talks about her creative habits and how she gets herself into that flow state. And, she talks about people who, they have certain actions, like she was saying about, when she goes to work out of a morning, the ritual is not going to the gym. The ritual is getting in the taxi to go to the gym. Once that action is set off, everything else is automatic.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like sitting in front of a keyboard and playing scales for anything up to 15 minutes. And it just completely shifts my entire mindset, and it allows me to access a different part of myself. So when we talk about rituals, where we get caught up in this thing of oh my God, I've got these things I've got to remember, and I've got to write this down, and I've got to look in the mirror and say my affirmations and all this shit. And I think that's one of the biggest faults in the self-improvement industry, the self-development, or whatever you want to call it. It's the thing of we're always given more to do. You have to say this every day. You have to do this practice. You have to do this. You have to schedule that. And it's well, hang on, we're all fucking busy enough as it is. And you expect me to do more. How's that going to help? The whole point of the exercise is that we come out of it with less to do than what we went in with. So that is, again, going back to sort of artist development, that's my kind of approach. A lot of the time, it's actually getting people to stop doing things because they're doing too much.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to that pushing and striving element. But ultimately, with rituals, they're really important because, again, they just allow you to ground and center into a certain mindset that allows you to access a particular part of you that can come out to a much greater degree. So I would highly recommend that people get a little studio ritual. And especially people who are time poor, where sometimes they only get a couple of hours a week because of work and family and stuff like that. You need to make that time count. So if you get a little ritual that allows you to get into that mindset straight away, then I would highly recommend it.
So what's the future for Paul Nolan?
It's a good question. Between now and the end of the year, a lot of studio time. Finishing a lot of music off. I've got a lot of music as myself, Paul Nolan, coming out in 2019, which a lot of people listening to this podcast will be thinking, oh, fucking at last. After so many years of, engineering and helping other people out and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's nice to be able to step out of the shadows. Just got a new press kit done, new website.
I've seen the photos look amazing.
Amazing. Nick Misen has absolutely, if he can make me look good, he can make anyone look good. Yeah, so he's smashed it. He's done really, really well. So anyone listening needs photographs doing, Nick Misen is your man. And that was fantastic. That was a great process of putting that press kit together because it's a really nice way of being able to put together like a sense of yourself and to be able to put not the best version of yourself, but it's the image that you want to project onto the world, which I think is very, very powerful. Which is why my main press shot is one of me smiling.
Yeah, I've seen someone comment, was it Andy?
I think so, yeah.
It's a first to see someone who smiles in a press shot because a lot of, especially techno, can be very serious at times.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, like I've got those more sort of, serious shots in there, but they're always done with like a little inflection of humour. I want to get my character across. I'm always want to remind people, like, we're not trying to solve the Middle East peace problem here. We're making fucking tunes. We're trying to bring joy to people's lives. Why are we acting like we're all so fucking miserable? You know what I mean? So, yeah, a lot of interesting music coming out. I've had some EPs signed already, which I can't talk about at the moment. But contracts are in the process of being signed. And I'm very, very happy with the platforms that I'm going to be sharing music with people on next year. And there's going to be a lot of travel, and I can see 2019 being quite a potent year for everything that I do.
Fantastic. So before my final question, I've got one more, and it's, if you were to see one change in the industry locally, nationally, internationally over the next year, 5 years, what would it be?
I think we need to have a deeper understanding of what it is that we're actually doing. And I say this as somebody who has only recently, after 20 years, really deepened his understanding of what it is that we're doing. It kind of relates to what my previous point is that we're all so caught up with taking this business so seriously and moving to Berlin and all wearing black and growing a beard and, Jesus Christ, I saw an interesting interview with, I think it was one of the guys from Underground Resistance, Mad Mike, the other day, and the way he said it was really funny, like, in an American accent. He was like, you're moving to Berlin, it's too late already. If you're moving to Berlin, it's done. If you're moving to Amsterdam, it's already too late. You need to go somewhere where there isn't a scene and create one, which I think is actually a really good piece of advice. But ultimately, we're working with music and we're working with sound in a really, really deep way, where we're offering, to be quite honest with you, we're offering sound therapy to people.
Yeah.
We really are. We don't realise it because we're too caught up in the image and playing the trendy genre and, trying to get signed to drum code and all that stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But we need to have a deeper understanding, and we really need to sit with what we're presenting to people, how we're presenting it, what kind of intention we actually place into it when we perform. I would invite listeners, especially DJs and producers, to maybe sit with that a little bit. And, I've been guilty of it, as I said, I've been through all sorts of shit in LA and over the years and got guilty, of, how can I put it, not having the correct intentions or the intentions that serve the highest purpose of the people in the room.
Yeah.
It's like Craig Richards said it best. It's like the best quote I've ever heard about DJing. He He said you have to DJ for yourself with the crowd in mind, not DJ for the crowd with yourself in mind.
Wow.
I don't even know whether I've said that the right way around. But it's a great quote. And basically the crux of the quote is you have to do what's right for you, but also as well you have to keep the crowd in mind, and you have to be able to present it in a way that's palatable to people, because you can transform people's lives with this music. I mean, I do genuinely hold the belief that dance music can change the world, and it already has. You know, it changed everything in this country in the late 80s, early 90s. You know, if you read a book, another one for the show notes, Altered States by Matthew Collin, it's like a concise history. I read it in 99, 2000. I actually wrote one of my university theses on that book, and on rave culture as a form of organisation. And it's interesting because you could pretty much attribute the death of football hooliganism in this country to ecstasy and to dance music.
Wow.
And how that changed people's perceptions. You know, there's a very famous story of how, you know, on the terraces, West Ham and Chelsea fans were absolutely murdering each other, and then they all went to Shoom on the Saturday night, and then when the lights come up at 5 a.m, you know, they're all high as fuck on ecstasy and all hugging each other and thinking they're each other's best friends. And then, funnily enough, you know, football hooliganism almost died within like a 3-year period, which is obviously not the only reason for it, but just it shows you the transformative power of dance music in a lot of ways. The combination of music and being able to, you know, have an intentional setting. Like the whole acid house movement was a deeply intentional thing. It was all about joy, unrestrained joy and connection, and I think that's something that the industry's lost, and I think it's something that we need to remind ourselves that that's what we're looking to do. But in general, I think we need to start, as DJs and producers, we need to start looking at ourselves more as, in a way, therapists, in a way, sound therapists, sound healers, in a way where we're actually offering transformative experiences to people through music. And hopefully that perception will take hold and will generate a whole new generation of artists who can actually, you know, meet with the music on that way. And I think a lot of the bigger names do that in some way, unconsciously, but you know, let's make it a more conscious effort, and I think we'll see it. I think it's already happening. If you look at parties like All Day I Dream, you look at parties like Gardens of Babylon in particular, you know, they're doing like opening meditations and sound baths before, and you don't have to go that far, but it's just presenting what you do with a serious intention to help people. I think that would be a huge step forward in the industry.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. So where can people find you online?
So on Facebook, my artist page is Paul Nolan Official. You can find Make Your Transition across all of the different platforms. So if you just type in Make Your Transition, all one word. The Make Your Transition website is transition.studio, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram personally at Paul Nolan Sound.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for the episode, Paul. It's been extremely insightful.
Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it. Cheers, Dan. Thank you.
So, episode number 7 of Your Music Industry has come to a close. What did you think? There's been so much to take in from this episode, so I'd recommend listening again, whether you want to learn about Paul's journey to Sasha and Late Night Tales, or some insight into Paul's lifestyle and well-being practices. If you head over to yourmusicindustry.com/007, you'll be able to gain access to all the videos and book recommendations he mentioned in this episode, including a really good video about the Sasha Late Night Tales album. Once again, if you need an access to a sound library like no other, Splice is your place to go with over 1 million samples. If you want to claim your free month today, use code LiverpoolAudio or head over to splice.com/Liverpool-audio. As always, thank you for being part of the Your Music Industry movement and story. Make sure to share this episode with anyone you think will benefit from it. And until then, stay creative, stay active, and I'll see you on Monday.